An airport cop pulled a taser on a black teen just for smiling. He froze when he learned the boy's uncle trains the FBI's tactical units. He thought a teenager's smile was disrespect, not innocence. He didn't realize the boy's uncle trained agents who teach others when not to pull the trigger. Subscribe if you believe no badge justifies cruelty. What's so funny, kid? The question sliced through the low murmur of the terminal like a sudden drop in cabin pressure. It didn't sound curious, it sounded sharp, like a blade disguised as a question. Malik Avery blinked, confused, the grin he'd worn just a second ago melting from his face as if yanked off by force. The air between him and the officer seemed to shrink, dense with something unspoken but deeply felt. Officer Trent Dallard stood 3 feet away, his stance aggressive, hand hovering near the arc of his belt where a square, black taser holster glinted faintly under the lights. His face was tight, mouth flat, jaw locked, eyes narrowed in suspicion that had no reason to exist. I was just laughing, Malik stammered, his voice quiet but polite, at something funny that happened. That's all. Jordan Avery, walking half a pace behind his nephew, instinctively stepped closer, his large frame now a silent barrier. He didn't speak yet, just scanned the officer's posture, noting the rigid shoulders, the shallow breath, the telltale readiness that didn't match the moment. He knew that stance. He'd trained men to hold it, but never to use it like this. Dallard's gaze flicked over to Jordan, assessing, then back to Malik like a dog who hadn't been given permission to bite, but was thinking about doing it anyway. That right? Dallard's voice held no warmth. You think this is a joke? Malik's eyebrows lifted, his eyes wide now. No, sir, he said quickly. I didn't mean anything by it. Jordan's hand flexed at his side. Is there a problem, officer? He asked calmly, projecting control but not submission. His tone carried authority, subtle but unmistakable. Dallard ignored the question. Let me see some ID, he barked instead, focusing again on Malik, who froze. There was a hesitation, less than a breath but enough to register, and Malik's hand slowly moved toward his back pocket. Around them, the flow of foot traffic began to slow, as if the tension were contagious. Conversations faded, luggage wheels paused, necks turned subtly toward the disturbance unfolding like a slow-motion wreck. Jordan stepped a half-step forward, shielding Malik slightly but not obstructively. He's a minor. And we're here to pick up his father. Is there a specific cause for this stop? Dallard's mouth twitched. Smart mouth, he muttered. Figures. Jordan didn't flinch, but the words burrowed under his skin like a warning. His mind moved quickly, analyzing the scenario like a training drill gone off script. He reached for calm. Sir, we're cooperating. He smiled. That's not a threat. He smirked, Dallard snapped. At me. Like I'm some kind of joke. Malik's voice cracked. I wasn't, I swear. Dallard raised a hand. Quiet. Behind him, another officer, slighter in build, younger, watched with hesitant eyes. He didn't move, but his brow creased with something close to concern. Jordan's voice lowered, but it grew sharper. This doesn't need to escalate. But it already had. Dallard shifted his footing. His thumb brushed the taser clip in a move that was too intentional to be idle. The message was clear. Malik noticed it too. His back stiffened. His hand, still holding the edge of his wallet, froze. Uncle, he said quietly. Jordan responded without turning. Stay calm. But it was too late. Dallard's eyes narrowed further. You taking a step back? He barked. Don't you move. You hear me? I wasn't. Stop resisting. The words were shouted, loud and preemptive before Malik had even shifted. The terminal shuddered under the sudden weight of the accusation. A ripple ran through the crowd, phones lifted, held at chest level, cameras blinking to life. Jordan's voice rose, for the first time loud enough to push back. Officer, stand down. But the words landed on deaf ears. Dallard's hand tightened around the taser grip. His posture screamed confrontation. Jordan angled his body, bracing for the moment he feared was coming. He thought of all the drills he'd led, all the seminars on de-escalation, all the young officers he'd trained to read a room and defuse instead of ignite. But in that moment, none of that mattered, because the wrong person had authority, and the right boy had simply smiled. And now, everything hung in the balance of one man's unearned fear and another's fading patience. Jordan stared directly at Dallard, his jaw clenched so tight it hurt. He wasn't just seeing a confrontation. He was seeing a fire about to be lit with a single spark. Some smiles, he thought grimly, cost more than words ever could. "Officer, is there a problem?" Jordan Avery's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Not sharp or aggressive, but steady, rooted in a deep understanding of authority. Yet the moment those words left his mouth, he knew they wouldn't land the way they should. The man standing across from him, Officer Trent Dallard, wasn't here for procedure. He was here for power. Dallard took a step closer, the polished leather of his boots creaking against the terminal floor. His jaw tightened, eyes narrowing at Malik, who now stood still, his smile long gone. "Maybe," Dallard replied, low and deliberate. "Depends on how your nephew explains that smirk." Malik's fingers trembled as he opened his wallet, his body language confused, almost childlike in its vulnerability. His backpack slipped slightly down his shoulder, but he didn't adjust it. The weight wasn't just physical anymore. "I wasn't smirking," Malik said softly, the words barely audible. His voice cracked with disbelief more than fear. But Dallard wasn't listening. Or maybe he was, and that was worse. The officer's tone sharpened. "You think this is funny?" His voice echoed off the metal beams above, attracting more eyes from nearby travelers. Conversation slowed. The line to security shuffled to a halt. A child tugged on his father's coat, whispering. Phones tilted upward. Jordan stepped slightly in front of Malik, his left hand raised casually, showing his palms, as if to indicate peace. "Officer," he began carefully, "my name is Jordan Avery. I work with the Federal Training Division, Tactical Protocol. We're just here to—" Dallard cut him off with a dismissive chuckle. "Then you should know better than to mouth off in a security zone." The shift was small but seismic. The way Dallard's hand settled near the grip of his taser, the way his partner, just a step behind, did nothing, just watched with eyes flicking between Jordan and Malik. The tension in the air thickened like wet concrete. "I'm not mouthing off," Jordan replied, his voice still calm but edged now. "I'm reminding you that a conversation is not a crime. Especially not when no one has done anything wrong." Malik shifted his weight again, instinctively stepping back, just a fraction of an inch, one foot behind the other. But that tiny motion was all Dallard needed. "Stop resisting." The words shot through the terminal like a siren. Travelers flinched. A suitcase toppled from a baggage cart. Somewhere behind the checkpoint, a metal detector beeped, ignored. Malik's eyes widened in horror. "I'm not." Dallard surged forward. His right hand moved in a blur, the taser now fully exposed, shimmering beneath the sterile lights. For a second, it wasn't clear whether he would draw it. Jordan raised his arms defensively, stepping in with one foot, positioning his body protectively in front of Malik. "Officer, stand down," he barked. The command was crisp, trained, carrying the weight of years of discipline behind it. But it meant nothing here. Dallard didn't flinch. His eyes locked on Malik, not Jordan. His nostrils flared. To him, this wasn't about order. It was about control. Malik's breathing quickened, his chest rising and falling with visible effort. The metallic taste of fear crept into his mouth. The crowd around them remained frozen, unsure whether they were watching a crime unfold or waiting to be told one had. A low voice broke the silence from behind Dallard. "Trent," the partner muttered under his breath, barely audible. "That's a kid." He didn't do anything. Dallard ignored him. The taser glinted again as Dallard's fingers curled tighter around it. The lights of the terminal shimmered off the chrome casing, casting fractured reflections across Malik's wide, unblinking eyes. The noise around them dimmed in Malik's ears, replaced by a dull throb. He wasn't sure if it was the crowd holding their breath or his heart trying to outrun time. Jordan's hand found his shoulder, firm, grounding, but even that felt far away. Jordan's mind raced, not with fear, but with fury and calculation. He'd trained men like Dallard, men who wore uniforms as armor, who mistook authority for immunity. But never once had he imagined standing on the receiving end of that mistake. And yet, here he was, watching it unfold in real time. More security personnel moved toward the commotion, uncertain whether to intervene or follow the lead of a fellow officer. None stepped forward. Jordan could feel the pattern forming, the one he'd seen in case studies, briefings, and closed-door discussions, always theoretical, always what if. Now it was personal. Now it was Malik. The moment stretched unbearably. Malik's lips parted. "Please, sir, I didn't." The taser on Dallard's belt was still, but the threat was alive. Jordan straightened, raising his voice again, not just to Dallard, but to the growing number of spectators and silent enforcers. "You're escalating a peaceful situation without cause," he said, making sure his voice carried. "This is on record. Eyes are on you." For a second, Dallard hesitated. Just a second. Enough for Jordan to see it, the conflict behind his eyes. Pride versus protocol. But pride was louder. His hand didn't lower. And Jordan knew, in that second of unbearable stillness, that the moment for reason had passed. Whatever happened next, it wouldn't be stopped by words. He took a breath, keeping his body between the officer and his nephew, who stood stunned behind him. For the first time in his life, Jordan realized grimly, training others to handle crises didn't prepare you for watching injustice unfold before your eyes. And then, as the crowd pressed in and the officers stood still, one thought landed like a stone in his chest. Power in the wrong hands, he thought, is the quickest way to destroy peace. The electric snap of the taser pierced the air like a whip crack, raw and sudden. Jordan saw the flick of Dallard's wrist, the unmistakable movement of a man who had done this before. The weapon left its holster with practiced ease, voltage already crackling, casting faint blue light onto the white tiles below. "Hands up!" Dallard shouted, his voice not a command but a threat riding on adrenaline. Malik's arms shot into the air, palms stretched wide, fingers splayed in panicked obedience. His backpack slid halfway down one shoulder, forgotten. His knees locked, his mouth parted slightly in confusion, not defiance. I didn't do anything," he stammered, the words brittle with fear. Jordan was already moving beside him, arms raised in tandem. "Easy," he called out, his voice deep but steady. "No one's resisting." He's just a kid. Around them, the terminal had slowed into a still life. Travelers frozen mid-step, murmured conversations cut short. Phones rose one by one, capturing what no one had expected to see. A uniformed officer threatening an unarmed teenager with a stun weapon for smiling. Officer Raiden Holt stood nearby, torn between duty and disbelief. He had seen Dallard act on impulse before, moments of unnecessary force, warnings delivered too harshly but always just shy of the line that would bring true consequences. This time, Raiden's gut twisted. "Trent," he murmured, just loud enough to be heard, "the kid's not doing anything." Dallard didn't even glance his way. His stare was locked on Malik, jaw clenched, breathing sharp. Something about the boy's face, the nerves, the innocence, the echo of laughter long past, seemed to crawl under his skin like an insult. "I said," Dallard growled, voice lower, tighter, "stop smirking." Malik's lips trembled. "I'm not." "Sir, I wasn't." The taser fired. A sharp pop tore through the silence, followed by the hiss of discharge. Blue light leapt from the device and the twin prong struck Malik's chest. His body convulsed violently. The sound of his scream tore something inside Jordan, who surged forward with a cry, but he was too late to intercept the shot. Malik dropped hard onto the floor, knees buckling before his torso hit tile with a sickening thud. His arms twitched, legs spasmed, his face twisted in agony. Luggage toppled nearby as passengers screamed. Some recoiled, others shouted. Many simply stared in horror. "Malik!" Jordan's voice cracked as he dropped to his knees beside his nephew, heart thundering. He reached out, placing a hand gently on the boy's side, shielding him from further harm. "You're all right, son. Stay with me." He turned, fury boiling just beneath the surface. "Get back," he barked to Dallard, his voice echoing through the terminal. "You've done enough." But Dallard advanced, raising the taser again, finger twitching on the trigger. "Don't move," he snapped. Before the weapon could fire again, Raiden moved. In a single decisive step, he interposed himself between Dallard and the boy on the ground, his arm reaching across to push the taser down. "Enough!" Raiden's voice cracked like a rifle report. For a moment, neither man moved. The air felt charged, like the static before a storm. Dallard's eyes narrowed, lips curled in frustration, but he relented, lowering the device slightly, though his breathing remained ragged. He looked around now, realizing the sea of witnesses, the blinking red dots on phone cameras, the growing sense of outrage pulsing like a heartbeat. Malik groaned beneath them, his body still trembling with residual voltage. Jordan's hand hovered over his chest, not sure where it hurt most. "Stay with me," he whispered. "You hear me? You're safe now." Footsteps pounded as uniformed security raced in from multiple gates, too late to prevent the violence but eager to contain its aftermath. One of them knelt beside Jordan. "Sir, paramedics are en route." "I'm not leaving him," Jordan said, voice cold steel. He looked up then, locking eyes with Dallard, who now stood stiffly as another officer stepped beside him, whispering in his ear. But Jordan didn't care about their excuses. He didn't need a badge to see what had just happened. Phones continued recording. The incident, caught from dozens of angles, was already in the cloud, already in inboxes, already rewriting whatever version the airport would try to tell. And in that frozen moment, as the airport hummed back to life around them, as angry voices clashed with official orders and passengers demanded answers, Jordan leaned down beside his nephew, brushing back Malik's curls with shaking fingers. Then he looked up at the man who had fired the weapon, who stood now like a soldier who'd fired into a crowd and realized too late he'd shot the wrong target, and said, low and clear, for all to hear, "You just shocked the wrong family." The taser wires snapped back like retracted whips, and Malik's body went limp, folding to the airport floor in an unnatural spasm of arms and knees. His head hit the tile with a dull, heart-splitting thud. The stunned silence that followed felt louder than the commotion itself. For a split second, the entire terminal seemed to forget how to breathe. Then came the screams. Travelers stumbled backward. Phones dropped. A baby began wailing somewhere behind the ticketing booths, but all Jordan Avery could hear was the static buzz still ringing from the taser discharge and the terrible silence where Malik's voice should have been. "Malik!" Jordan dropped to his knees beside his nephew, his hand sliding under the boy's twitching head. Malik's face was contorted in pain, eyes fluttering, chest rising in erratic jolts. The two prongs of the taser stuck grotesquely out of his shirt, still sizzling faintly. A thin line of smoke curled upward. "Medic!" Jordan roared, his voice raw, reverberating through the terminal. "We need a medic now." But the crowd wasn't moving toward him. It was watching, recording, documenting. Officer Trent Dallard stood frozen, his arm slack at his side, taser still in hand. The color had drained from his face. His fingers twitched around the grip as if unsure whether to holster it or drop it. The situation had moved faster than even his misplaced bravado could control. Across the terminal, the clatter of boots signaled the arrival of airport security reinforcements. A trio of officers pushed through the crowd, their earpieces buzzing with conflicting orders. One shouted for people to stay back, while another yelled for a stretcher. The scene had become a vortex of confusion. Jordan didn't move from Malik's side. His hands. From above, in the tower-like airport command center with its tinted observation windows, Chief Vernon Slade watched the scene unfold. His sharp eyes narrowed as he took in the chaos below. The boy on the ground, the uncle holding him, the officer who now looked more like a child caught in his own fire. Slade exhaled slowly, rubbing his temples. "You recognize that name?" his deputy asked beside him, arms crossed. "Dallard." "Unfortunately," Slade muttered. 2 complaints last year. One involved a pregnant woman. All cleaned up. Internally, his deputy didn't respond, but the implication lingered in the silence. This time, there would be no internal fix. Slade turned toward the surveillance monitor banks. "Get me all camera angles on that incident, every second of footage, and lock them down." Hovered, uncertain, knowing the boy needed medical care but terrified to move him. His years of training screamed protocol, but his heart screamed panic. A young paramedic, no older than 22, arrived breathless, kneeling beside them with a defibrillator kit and adrenaline pen. "Sir, I need you to step back." "He's my nephew," Jordan said tightly, showing his badge without looking away from Malik. "I'm not moving." The paramedic hesitated only a moment before nodding and going to work. Jordan watched every movement, oxygen mask, vitals check, stabilizer straps. His brain cataloged each detail, but emotionally he was far away, fighting the rising wave of guilt, fury, and helplessness. Behind them, Dallard finally snapped out of his trance. He stumbled backward, colliding with one of the reinforcements. His lips moved, but his voice cracked. He stepped back. I thought he was resisting." No one responded. His deputy looked uneasy. "Sir, this is going viral. It's already on 3 live streams. Exactly why we control the narrative," Slade said grimly. Down in the terminal, Jordan stood again, jaw tight, watching as Malik was lifted onto a stretcher. The boy's hand clutched at nothing. Jordan leaned close, whispering into his ear. "You're gonna be all right. I've got you." He turned to follow the medics but was intercepted by a wall of uniformed guards. "Sir, you can't go past this point." Jordan pulled out his ID, flipping it open to reveal his federal badge. "I'm a senior tactical advisor for the Federal Training Division. That's my family on that stretcher, and I need access to the command center." One of the officers glanced at the badge, then radioed his superior. After a tense pause, a static-laced voice responded, "Access denied." Procedure protocol in effect. Jordan's voice dropped to a tone far more dangerous than shouting. "Your procedure is covering up a civil rights violation. You sure you want to be part of that?" The officer stood his ground. "I have my orders." Jordan stepped back, breathing slow and heavy. The steel in his posture returned. "Fine," he said. "Then I'll call someone who outranks everyone in this building." He pulled out his phone and walked toward the medical wing. As he passed the waiting bay, his knuckles whitened around the device. His fingers scrolled quickly to a number labeled Only. E. Roden. FedOps. "Pick up," he muttered. "Come on, Elias, pick up." It rang once, twice. "Roden. It's Avery. I need surveillance footage from Gate C, full incident, Dallard's personnel file, all of it. Tonight." "What happened?" "Your nightmare scenario," Jordan replied coldly. "An unarmed black teen." Smiled. Got tased. Roden didn't answer for several seconds. Then, "I'll see what I can pull without raising alarms." "I'm not asking," Jordan said. "Get it to me before midnight." He hung up and exhaled through his nose. His body ached with fury, but his voice had never been steadier. He reached the hospital bay and slipped through the sliding doors just as Malik began to stir. The boy's eyes opened slowly, unfocused. Tubes and wires surrounded him. A quiet monitor beeped in rhythm with his breath. Jordan leaned over, voice lowered but gentle. "Malik, you're okay. You're safe." Malik blinked, trying to process the brightness around him. His lips moved, dry and cracked. "Did I do something wrong?" The question shattered something deep inside Jordan. He gripped the boy's hand carefully, his voice low and steady, though his heart trembled. "No, son. You did everything right. It's the world that didn't." The moment the hospital room door C-licked shut behind him, Jordan Avery's phone was already pressed to his ear. The fluorescent lights above buzzed quietly, a harsh echo of the ones at Brynford International where his nephew's smile had been misread as a threat. The image of Malik collapsing after the taser hit him, legs buckling, eyes wide with confusion, still looped behind his eyes like a broken film reel. Jordan paced along the window, every movement precise, controlled, but beneath that control burned a heat that would not be soothed by silence. "Brenner," he said into the phone, "I need confirmation." Were the taser logs entered into the incident file? On the other end, a colleague from Tactical Systems hesitated. "They're claiming corruption in the entry records," he finally replied. "The logs are marked as incomplete data retrieval. That doesn't happen by accident." Jordan's jaw tightened. Then it's already started. The cover-up. He ended the call and stared out over the hospital parking lot, watching journalists gather at the entrance like moths circling a wound. They weren't there for truth. They were there for spectacle. But Jordan didn't care who listened, as long as someone did. He turned back toward the room, watching Malik lie still under white sheets, a plastic oxygen line resting below his nose. The monitor beeped softly with each heartbeat. The rhythm was steady, fragile, but steady. Malik stirred, voice barely audible. "Uncle, are they going to do anything to him?" Jordan sat at the edge of the bed. "They're going to try to do nothing. That's why I can't let them." The boy blinked slowly, his eyes searching his uncle's. "Why are they scared of you?" Jordan didn't answer immediately. He reached over, adjusted Malik's blanket, his touch careful. Then, without turning, he murmured, "Because I train the people who train them." Those words lingered in the air like smoke. Downstairs, the hospital lobby buzzed with tension. A press release had just gone out from the airport authority claiming ongoing investigation and full transparency. But Jordan knew what that language meant. Delay and deflect. It wasn't enough. He needed something concrete, something they couldn't spin or erase, and there was only one man who could give it to him. Raiden Holt, the partner, the witness. He opened a secure messaging app on his phone and typed quickly, "Meet me. Tonight. Discretion necessary. You know what you saw. Tell the truth, and I'll protect you." Jordan sent it, then deleted the message history. Across the hospital room, Malik had drifted back to sleep. The boy's hand lay limply by his side, his wrist still wrapped in adhesive tape. Jordan leaned forward, his face briefly etched in the blue monitor light. The storm outside hadn't arrived yet, but he could feel it gathering. Minutes later, his phone buzzed with a reply. A single word. "Okay." He exhaled once, slowly. Outside the hospital walls, the narrative was already being shaped by other hands. Dallard had been placed on temporary leave, but not arrested. The taser logs were now corrupted. The command center refused access to full video feeds, citing internal review protocols. Every angle was being blocked by red tape wrapped in the language of caution. But Jordan had trained too many of these systems to fall for their games. He knew where their pressure points were. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small notepad, his field log. On it, he scribbled down 3 names: Slade, Harmon, Frears. 3 men tied to the airport's tactical enforcement chain. If there was a trail, they were part of it. His plan was taking shape now, not a loud confrontation, but a strategic exposure. Not vengeance. Exposure. He would unravel them, layer by layer, and it would begin tonight. Jordan stood, smoothed out the creases in his jacket, and crossed to the window one last time. Below, the lights of news vans glinted against rain-damp asphalt. Behind him, the soft beep of Malik's monitor pulsed steady as a war drum waiting for command. He picked up his phone again. This time, he called someone higher, someone from inside his old tactical response division, someone who owed him more than a favor. "It's Avery," he said once the line clicked open. "I need gate security cam backups, and I need Dallard's full personnel file before midnight. Don't run it through official channels. Use the legacy access Bridge A pause." Then the man on the line simply said, "Understood." Jordan ended the call. The path ahead would not be easy. But ease was never the point. Truth never bloomed in comfort. It thrived in friction. He turned to look at Malik one more time, listening to the quiet breathing, the soft hum of machines that stood vigil where justice had failed. Tomorrow, everything would begin. And as he stepped into the dim hallway, his whisper cut through the silence like a blade. "Tomorrow," Jordan whispered, "we begin." The diner door creaked open with a chime that felt too cheerful for the weight Jordan carried on his shoulders. He stepped inside, the smell of burnt coffee and stale toast clinging to the air like the faded memories on the photo-covered walls. He didn't pause. His eyes scanned the back corner, where Raiden Holt sat hunched low in a cracked leather booth, his hat pulled down, his fingers nervously stirring a cup of untouched coffee. Jordan moved toward him with the calm of someone trained for high-stakes tension, but not immune to the human toll. As he slid into the booth, neither man spoke for a long beat. The silence between them wasn't awkward, it was thick with the gravity of what they both knew had brought them here. "I shouldn't even be meeting you," Raiden muttered, eyes still fixed on the coffee like it might offer answers he couldn't say out loud. Jordan leaned in, elbows on the table, voice low and controlled. "Then why did you come?" Raiden exhaled, the breath shaky, as if he'd been holding it for a day and a half. "Because what happened yesterday was wrong. Dallard crossed the line. But you don't understand. He's protected." Jordan's eyes narrowed slightly. His tone didn't rise. It didn't need to. "By who?" Raiden's hands fumbled under the table, retrieving a small black flash drive from inside his jacket. He didn't hand it over at first. He held it between his thumb and forefinger, weighing its cost. "Command told me to wipe my body cam file. Said it was an equipment failure. Said Malik's behavior aggravated the situation. But I didn't delete it." He pushed the flash drive across the table. Jordan picked it up without a word, slipping it into the inside pocket of his coat. His movements were precise, practiced. But something flared behind his eyes. Pride, maybe, or fury held on a tight leash. "What's on this?" he asked. Raiden's voice dropped even lower. "Audio." Dallard said, and I quote, "I'll teach that kid not to laugh at me." Right before pulling the taser. It wasn't about protocol. It wasn't a threat assessment. It was personal. Jordan's jaw clenched. The words landed like a fist to the ribs, not because they surprised him, but because they didn't. "And the protection?" Raiden nodded grimly. "The Airport Enforcement Union. Their chief, Marin Cade, he owes Dallard. Covered for him 2 years ago in a use-of-force incident that nearly cost a man his hearing. Dallard dragged him by the collar into a storage unit during a pat-down. The guy had filed a complaint. It disappeared. And Cade made it disappear?" Raiden gave a slight nod. "In exchange for silence on something else. I don't know what, but Dallard always brags that Cade owes him a leash and a muzzle." Jordan sat back for a moment. The sound of silverware clinking at another table felt absurdly distant. He had trained people to respond to emergencies, to diffuse threats and think critically under pressure. But now, he was operating in a space where the threats wore badges, and the truth had to be smuggled out on thumb drives. "This goes outside the chain," he said finally. Raiden looked up sharply. "You're sure?" "If we keep it inside, it gets buried." Raiden rubbed his temples. This could tank my entire career." Jordan didn't flinch. "And if you hadn't recorded it, they would have buried Malik and made him the villain. You didn't just keep your job, you kept your soul." Raiden sat back processing those words. Outside the diner window, a squad car rolled by slowly, its reflection stretching across the frosted glass. Jordan clocked it. He didn't turn his head, but he noted the badge number on the passenger door. "Who else knows you didn't wipe it?" Jordan asked. "No one," Raiden replied. "Not yet." "Good. Keep it that way." For now, Raiden's voice caught as he asked, "What are you going to do with it?" Jordan's response was slow, but sure. "What they won't. I'm not just taking down Dallard. I'm going after the whole ladder they built to protect him." "You'll make enemies," Raiden warned. "I already have," Jordan replied. As he stood to leave, he paused. The air outside had turned colder, and the sun had disappeared behind a bank of gray clouds. Winter wasn't here yet, but its shadow had touched everything in Brynford. Jordan reached into his coat, produced a burner phone, and slid it across the table. "You're going to need this. Keep your department-issued cell on silent. Anything important, use this number." Raiden took it with a nod that carried the weight of someone crossing a line he couldn't uncross. Jordan turned toward the exit, adjusting the collar of his coat as the door creaked open behind him. The breeze hit his face like a slap, sharp, unwelcoming. But he welcomed it. It told him the silence was ending. The time for whispers was over. He stepped out into the cold, the flash drive in his coat like a lit fuse waiting to be sparked. His breath fogged in the air, but his thoughts were clear. Behind him, the bell above the diner door jingled faintly as it shut, sealing the conversation within those worn-out walls. Truth doesn't whisper, he thought. It waits for the right moment to strike. Malik thrashed beneath the hospital blanket, a muffled cry slipping from his lips. His body jerked involuntarily as though the taser's current still flowed through his chest. Monitors beeped in protest and a nurse hurried in, calming him with practiced movements, adjusting the IV line, smoothing the damp hair from his forehead. He was still asleep, if you could call it that. His eyes darted beneath closed lids, caught in a loop of voltage and shouting. In his dreams, he kept seeing the flash, kept hearing the voice scream, "Stop resisting!" over and over, louder each time, until it became all he could hear. Jordan stood at the doorway, watching silently. His arms were crossed, the muscles in his jaw tight. For a long moment, he didn't speak. He couldn't. The sight of Malik, once carefree, now twisted by trauma, tightened something in his chest that training never prepared him for. He finally stepped into the room, his footsteps soft against the cold tile, the rhythm syncing with the pulse monitor beside the bed. "You're safe," he said, voice low, steady. He crouched beside the bed and gently adjusted the boy's blanket, tucking the corners like his brother used to do when Malik was small. The teenager stirred, but didn't speak. Jordan's hand rested on Malik's shoulder, his touch firm but gentle. "You're safe now," he repeated. Malik's eyes blinked open slowly. He looked around, confused at first, until the sterile white walls reminded him exactly where he was. His uncle's face slowly came into focus, worn, tight with fatigue, but calm. "Why did he hate me for smiling?" Malik asked, his voice thin, nearly inaudible. His lips barely moved, but his eyes, red-rimmed, unfocused, were filled with something deeper than fear. The question caught Jordan off guard. He blinked once, then sat down fully beside the bed, shoulders slumping slightly. His voice, when it came, was soft but heavy. "Because some people mistake light for mockery," he said, each word deliberate, "and they fear what they don't understand." Malik turned his head slightly, gazing at the ceiling. The hum of the overhead light filled the silence that followed. Jordan didn't stay long after that. He kissed Malik's forehead briefly, then stood and stepped out of the room, nodding at the nurse stationed outside. In the hallway, the buzz of media voices filtered faintly through the thick hospital walls. Cameramen crowded the parking lot, anchors speaking rapidly into microphones while footage of the incident ran on screens across the country. Jordan ignored it all. He pulled out his phone and dialed. A few rings later, a familiar voice answered. "Elias Roden," came the curt greeting. "It's Jordan," he said. "We need to talk." Now there was a pause. "This about Brynford?" Jordan didn't answer directly. "You're in federal oversight now, right?" "I am." "Then you're going to want to see what I have." 10 minutes later, Jordan sat alone in the hospital's staff lounge, a private room tucked away behind an access-restricted corridor. The lights were dim, and the old leather couch creaked beneath him as he waited. On the table before him, his phone was set to speaker mode. The line clicked. "I'm here," Elias said. Jordan wasted no time. "I have body cam footage." "Audio, too. It shows Dallard escalating, verbally provoking a minor, issuing a false resistance call, and firing a taser without cause." Elias exhaled, but it wasn't surprise, it was confirmation. "You know what you're sitting on, don't you?" "I do." "If that leaks," Elias continued, "you won't just burn Dallard. You'll expose a line of command that's been clearing his record for years. Supervisors, union reps, internal affairs, all of them complicit." Jordan didn't flinch. "Then maybe that's what needs to happen." There was a long silence on the other end. When Elias spoke again, his voice was different, lower, wary. "Jordan, off the record, I'll authorize a private inquiry. But if you go public with this before we've gathered everything, you'll put Malik in the middle of a storm." "I know." "And you?" Elias asked. "You could lose your clearance. Everything you've built." Jordan looked at his reflection in the dark window across the room. His face seemed older, sharper, eyes hard as stone. "There's nothing I've built that's worth more than what happened to that boy." Elias was quiet again. Then, finally, "I'll start the wheels turning." Quietly. "But you're walking a thin line, Jordan. Careful you don't fall off." The call ended. Back down the hall, a nurse approached him softly. "He's resting, but he's murmuring in his sleep again." Talking about Sparks. Shouting Jordan thanked her with a nod and walked slowly back to the hospital room. The monitors still blinked softly. Malik's head turned from side to side, a crease between his brows. Jordan sat beside him once more. He didn't speak at first, just listened to the hum of the machines, the occasional beep, the hush of distant voices. Finally, he leaned forward and whispered close to Malik's ear, his voice barely audible. "This isn't over," he said. "It's just changing form." He accused a teen of harassment for smiling too long, then fired his taser without warning. If you believe power without restraint is the real danger, hit subscribe now. Justice isn't about fear, it's about control. The video hit the internet like a shockwave. A 30-second body cam clip, leaked by an unnamed source, surged across platforms within hours. No warning, no blur, no context, just raw footage. Officer Trent Dallard barking at a trembling teenager, "You think you can grin at me?" Followed by the electric discharge of a taser and the sickening thud of Malik Avery's body hitting the terminal floor. By midday, the words, "teen tased for smiling," had trended across every major outlet. The video looped endlessly, on phones in subways, in office break rooms, behind polished news anchors trying to match their outrage with restraint. But no voice could outdo the video itself. It was loud enough, clear enough, damning enough. At Brynford International's internal office, chaos had already begun. Behind glass walls tinted against the afternoon sun, Chief Vernon Slade stood silent. The video paused on a freeze frame of Malik mid-collapse. His fingers curled against the edge of the conference table. Around him, aides and advisors murmured half-measures, denials, delay tactics, damage control. One voice, his deputy's, pierced through. "We need to release a statement." Now Slade exhaled through his nose. "Say it was edited," he muttered. "Claim manipulation. We never authorized that footage. Sir, it has timestamps." "I said what I said," Slade snapped. Meanwhile, across town, Jordan Avery stood alone in the hospital's quiet family lounge. His phone buzzed non-stop, but he ignored it. His eyes were fixed on a mounted television in the corner. There it was again, the headline, the footage, the flash of blue lightning, and, beside it, a photo of Malik, aged 16, smiling beside a trophy at a robotics fair. The contrast was almost cruel. Jordan's jaw clenched. He dialed. "Elias," he said into the receiver, his voice steel. "We need to authenticate the footage. Metadata, frame count, everything. I want the lie burned before they have time to light the match." On the other end, Captain Elias Roden, calm, precise, replied, "Already working on it. You'll have the verified timestamps in under an hour. But brace yourself, Jordan. They're going to fight dirtier now." Jordan hung up. He turned and stepped into Malik's hospital room. The boy sat upright, bandaged and silent, his expression unreadable. Cameras flashed outside the hospital window, their distant bursts like lightning behind curtains. "Uncle," Malik said softly, "why are they still lying?" Jordan approached slowly, kneeling beside the bed. "Because the truth scares them," he said, "and you just became the truth they can't silence." That evening, under a sky bruised with the first hints of twilight, Jordan stood before a crowded press gathering outside the hospital. Dozens of microphones formed a metal thicket before him. Cameramen crouched, reporters leaned forward, and beside him stood Malik, still pale, still recovering, but upright, a quiet storm behind his eyes. "I will not answer questions," Jordan began, voice clear and commanding. "But I will show you something." He stepped aside as a portable screen behind him flickered to life. The unedited body cam footage played in full view. Gasps rolled through the crowd like distant thunder, but no voice interrupted. No hand reached for a question. When Dallard's snarled words, "You think you can grin at me?" echoed through the speakers, the silence was complete. Jordan turned to the reporters. "That is not just misconduct. That is a mindset, one that punishes innocence, weaponizes fear, and shames integrity. We will not let it hide behind badges or unions or bureaucracy." In the airport control tower, Chief Slade watched the live feed in silence, one hand gripping the armrest of his chair. His deputy shifted nervously beside him. "If Avery keeps this up," the deputy whispered, "he'll uncover things we've kept sealed for years." Slade didn't respond immediately. His eyes remained fixed on the screen, on the boy, the uncle, the footage, the crowd. Finally, his lips curled into a grim line. "Then prepare for a war." Back at the hospital, the press conference ended. Jordan turned to Malik, resting a hand on his shoulder. "You did good," he said softly. Malik didn't smile, but in his stillness there was strength. As they turned to leave, the final question wasn't asked by any journalist. It came from within Jordan himself, the understanding that this was no longer about a taser or a smile or even one boy's name. It was about every system that had survived too long by silencing moments like these. And so, as he walked Malik inside, his eyes caught the reflection of flashing lights against the windows, and his thoughts echoed only one truth. Sometimes, Jordan thought, justice starts with a leak. The door slammed open without warning. 3 federal agents, dressed in dark suits and flashing urgent identification, stepped into the Brentford International Airport's administrative floor. The lead agent's voice cut through the morning air like a blade. "We need immediate access to security archives, all terminals, all backups, no delays." The receptionist behind the glass stammered, caught between protocol and panic. One agent moved past her without waiting for approval, heading straight toward the surveillance control room. In the tower above, internal affairs had already sensed the incoming tide. Alarms weren't sounding, but within minutes, senior officers were shredding documents, wiping screens, rewriting logs. A junior analyst nervously hovered over a monitor, whispering to his supervisor, "Should I remove the Taser logs?" The man nodded grimly. "Do it." We'll say the system auto-purged after 48 hours. Down in a windowless room inside the hospital, Jordan Avery watched it all unfold through a secure video feed Elias had quietly routed to him. The feed wasn't official. It had been routed through an internal whistleblower from federal oversight, but it was enough. Jordan's fingers clenched around the tablet. He could see them, men in suits darting between systems, rewriting history while pretending to defend it. Then came the interview footage. Trent Dallard sat in a cold conference room, flanked by union attorneys. He leaned forward, sweat dotting his temple. "I had credible intel," he said, voice low but calculated. "There was a report." A suspect matched the kid's description. "I acted on that." "Which report?" one investigator asked, voice neutral but sharp. Dallard hesitated. The screen switched. There was no report, no alert. The footage showed Malik, alone, calm, holding a paperback novel in one hand and a water bottle in the other. The timestamp aligned with every known frame. No aggression, no threat. Just a kid smiling in the wrong place at the wrong time. Jordan leaned back slowly, the weight of what he already suspected pressing down with final confirmation. This wasn't just negligence. This was designed. He pulled up a blank file and began connecting names. Every official who had signed off on Dallard's use of force clearance. Every supervisor who had failed to escalate previous complaints. Every IT log that accidentally wiped footage the day after Malik was assaulted. Patterns emerged. There was talk, buried deep in archived training documents, of an informal incentive system. Officers were being rewarded, not officially, but subtly, for incidents classified as proactive deterrence. Reports labeled under Category Red brought discretionary bonuses, overtime approvals, commendations, and, in some cases, early promotion consideration. Jordan stared at the pattern. These weren't mistakes. They were quotas, masked as vigilance. Across town, in a dull office where sunlight barely reached the desk, Raiden Holt sat hunched over a transfer notice. The ink was still drying. He was being reassigned. Not fired, just tucked away. A desk job, no badge, no threat. He stared at the paper until the words blurred. Then his phone buzzed. "Raiden," Jordan said as soon as the line connected. "They're coming for you. Not just to punish, but to silence." "They said I'm unreliable," Raiden replied, voice strained. "They're painting me like I'm unstable, like I made it up." "You didn't," Jordan said. "You're the reason this isn't buried." There was a long silence. On Raiden's end, the sounds of packing tape being pulled, drawers being emptied. "But how do I stop this?" Raiden asked quietly. "How do I fight when they've already decided I don't exist?" Jordan stared at his wall. Lines of data, faces, signatures, all connected like a spider's web waiting to be cut. "You don't," he said softly. "I do." That night, long after the hospital lights dimmed and Malik had fallen into a rare, peaceful sleep, Jordan sat alone at the desk in his apartment. Outside the window, the city blinked in fractured lights, as if uncertain whether to sleep or stay awake. He opened a secure server, one only accessed through 2 layers of biometric encryption. He uploaded every document he had gathered, every footage fragment, every redacted report, every officer's name who had turned a blind eye. Then he encrypted it all with his federal clearance key. A blinking line waited for a destination. He entered one name, Elias Roden, and below it, one message. "If I disappear, release it." Jordan didn't hesitate. He hit send. The upload bar ticked upward, 40%, 60, 95, complete. He closed the terminal and stood, crossing the room to where Malik lay resting under a soft blue blanket. The boy's chest rose and fell in calm rhythm, a sharp contrast to the chaos they had endured. Jordan rested a hand on the windowsill. Beyond the glass, the skyline shimmered faintly, like a city trying to hide its guilt beneath blinking lights. He looked down at his own reflection, eyes tired but steady. "If truth is dangerous," he whispered, "then it's finally being heard." The footage hit the networks like a detonation. It didn't come from the main terminal's feed, every inch of which had already been combed, scrubbed, and locked down. No, this video emerged from an unexpected angle, low resolution but crystal clear in what it revealed. A grainy clip from a service corridor near the East Hangar, time-stamped just 6 hours before Malik Avery was tased. In the frame, Chief Vernon Slade stood rigid beneath a flickering overhead bulb, his silhouette bulky against the cinder-block wall. A younger man approached, Trent Dallard. No words were heard, but what mattered came in gestures. A glance over the shoulder, the slip of a sealed envelope into Dallard's palm, a brief handshake that wasn't warm but binding. The clip ended there, yet its implications screamed louder than any audio could. Inside a modest apartment downtown, Jordan Avery watched it loop on his phone in silence. His face remained unreadable, but his knuckles whitened around the device. He knew what this was. This wasn't some impulsive act by a rogue officer. This was coordination, control, corruption carved into policy. Jordan called Elias Roden immediately. The captain answered on the second ring, his tone clipped. "I saw it," he said before Jordan could speak. "How deep does it go?" Jordan asked, pacing beneath a dim ceiling light. His apartment, usually immaculately ordered, now bore the chaos of sleepless strategy. Printouts on the wall, maps, lists of names. Elias didn't dodge. "Slade's been funneling incident reports to a subcontractor, Oratron Systems. Every incident like yours increases the metrics for federal security allocations. More tension means more funding." Dallard wasn't guessing. He was delivering Jordan's mind spun. Every suppressed complaint, every missing report, every hastily written clearance order, it all snapped into place like steel cogs in a cold machine. He breathed once, slow and deep. "Then it's time they see what that machine really looks like." By nightfall, he had scheduled a live press statement for the next morning. He didn't bother with flashy production, just a microphone, a backdrop, and the truth. He stayed up late printing documents, encrypting footage, outlining connections between names, ranks, approvals. He knew what he was assembling wasn't just a speech, it was a weapon. But just past 2 in the morning, Jordan returned from the building's shared printer room and felt it. The air inside his apartment was wrong. Heavy. Still. He opened the door slowly. Silence greeted him. Then the sound. A gentle creak, faint but undeniable. His eyes darted to his desk. The laptop was gone. His notes scattered. Not stolen, just torn out of order. Pages fluttered near the window, which now stood open, letting in the breeze. He stepped inside carefully, scanning corners, heart hammering in his chest, not out of fear, but calculation. Whoever did this didn't want him harmed. Not yet. They wanted him shaken, off balance, but they had underestimated him. He crouched beside the desk, noting that his backup drive, hidden beneath the false bottom drawer, remained untouched. He breathed out through his nose. They were bold, but not thorough. 10 minutes later, Jordan had Malik, Raiden, and himself loaded into a secure transport provided by a friend from Federal Logistics. They were relocated to a safe house outside the city, a converted ranger cabin deep in the outskirts, thick with trees and cellular blind spots. There, Jordan opened his satchel and extracted a secondary drive, slipping it into his coat pocket. Raiden sat across from him, pale. "They came into your home," he muttered. "They're going to keep coming." Jordan didn't flinch. "Then they can find an empty room next time," he said, checking the files on his backup device. Everything was there: body cam footage, the time-stamped service corridor clip, emails cross-referencing Aurotron systems to Slade's budget ledger. Enough to crater careers. Malik, curled in a recliner nearby, stirred slightly. His eyes fluttered open, glazed with grogginess. "Is everything okay?" he mumbled. Jordan rose and crossed the room, placing a steady hand on the boy's shoulder. "We're safe," he said, "but tomorrow, the world changes." At 5:47 a.m., Jordan stood by the cabin's narrow window, watching the fog rise like ghosts through the trees. The city was waking. Somewhere downtown, Chief Slade would be watching the same skyline, phone in hand, scrambling. And Jordan, holding a mug of black coffee untouched since it was poured, whispered to himself as the sun cut through the mist, "If truth burns, let it light the whole field." The courthouse doors opened and the noise outside surged like a wave crashing against stone. Cameras clicked in rapid bursts. Reporters leaned over the railings, voices raised, microphones outstretched like blades. But inside the building, the air was still, so quiet that even the soft shuffle of dress shoes on the marble floor seemed to echo with weight. Jordan Avery entered without ceremony, his posture upright, suit perfectly pressed, but his expression was carved from stone. He walked beside his nephew, 16-year-old Malik Avery, who sat stiffly in a folding chair ranged just off stage left. The boy's face was pale, his body thinner than it had been a month ago, but his spine remained straight. He didn't look like a victim. He looked like a witness to something bigger than himself. Jordan paused at the podium as the murmur of voices settled. The weight of dozens of cameras aimed at him didn't rattle his composure. He looked down at the prepared papers in front of him but didn't read. He didn't need to. He raised his head slowly and began. This was not a misunderstanding. His voice was calm but sharp, like cold steel drawn quietly in a room full of glass. This was a system rewarding fear and punishing humanity. Gasps didn't come all at once. They built in waves as the sentence landed. Some reporters froze, others scribbled furiously. A few exchanged looks, unsure of what they were about to witness. Jordan reached down and tapped the spacebar on the laptop connected to the projector behind him. The screen lit up with a grainy security recording, the same one that had circulated online, but now with federal watermark authentication stamped in the corner. The clip played with audio. "I said, stop smirking." The sound of the taser firing followed. People visibly flinched. Then came the second clip, body cam footage from Officer Raiden Holt. The view was shaky but clear. It captured Officer Dallard's voice. "I'll teach that kid not to laugh at me." Murmurs erupted in the courtroom. Reporters turned toward each other in disbelief. Jordan remained silent, letting the footage speak for him. Once the video ended, he stepped forward again. "You've just seen what they tried to bury," he said. "Deleted logs, suppressed footage, altered reports. But the truth doesn't vanish when you hit delete. It waits." He turned slightly toward the audience, letting his eyes scan the rows of faces, journalists, city officials, federal observers. But his gaze didn't linger on them. It settled finally on Malik. This boy, my nephew, was tased for smiling. His body became a message, and the message was this: don't be visible, don't be joyful, don't forget your place, but we are not returning to silence. He stepped away from the podium and lifted a manila folder from the side table. He opened it and held up the printouts: Taser discharge logs with timestamps, access card records, and the damning footage of Chief Vernon Slade handing an envelope to Officer Dallard in a back corridor just hours before the attack. "This wasn't the act of one man," Jordan said. "This was a chain of decisions. A culture of fear, a contract built on conflict." The judge in the room nodded slowly. Federal agents standing near the side doors made quiet movements toward their radios. The weight of the moment shifted tangibly. A hand went up in the crowd, a journalist from Channel 9. "Mr. Avery, Do you have confirmation that the footage is real? Jordan didn't flinch. Yes, verified and authenticated by the Department of Federal Oversight. As if on cue, the overhead screen briefly displayed the confirmation stamp and federal seal. It was irrefutable. Outside the courthouse, the crowd, once buzzing with anticipation, now roared. Chants of "Justice for Malik" echoed beyond the doors. The walls vibrated faintly with the pressure of people finally given a reason to believe. Across town, in an office lined with leather-bound law books and polished awards, Chief Vernon Slade stood at his window. His phone buzzed over and over again, but he ignored it. His face was drained of color. The footage was undeniable, and now, so was the trail back to him. By mid-afternoon, federal agents issued an arrest warrant. The news broke live during ongoing coverage. Reporters scrambled, broadcasting updates by the minute. But Jordan, seated quietly next to Malik in the back room, didn't smile. There was no celebration in his eyes, only a quiet resolve. His hands were folded, his head slightly bowed. Malik leaned over, voice low. "You did it," the boy said, his voice steady despite the exhaustion in it. Jordan turned, expression softening. He shook his head gently, resting a firm hand on his nephew's shoulder. "No." We reminded them what truth looks like when it refuses to bow. The gavel of reform came down harder than anyone expected. Weeks after the Taser incident at Brentford International, the airport was no longer the place it once was. Gone were the blank-faced officers walking unchecked through terminals. In their place came new protocol briefings, forced retrainings, closed-door hearings. Every officer was under review, every file reopened. The air felt different, stiff with fear, heavy with scrutiny. No one could pretend anymore. Chief Vernon Slade, the man whose shadow once darkened the entire command tower, resigned quietly before his scheduled federal hearing. No press conference, no apology, just a letter submitted to Internal Affairs and a silent exit through a back door lined with agents. His name vanished from the airport roster within hours, but the damage he orchestrated still echoed like a curse through every hallway. Behind closed doors, the Union scrambled to protect itself, but the public was no longer willing to forget. Trent Dallard's fate arrived less quietly. Charged formally with excessive force and misconduct, he was removed in full view of the same station where he once barked orders. Shackled, head down, no words spoken. That image circulated faster than any statement could. Meanwhile, in the quiet corner of the city's medical center, Raiden Holt stood outside Malik Avery's hospital room, a bouquet of blue irises clutched awkwardly in his hand. The flowers trembled slightly as he exhaled, unsure whether this visit would bring peace or pain. He knocked once, then pushed open the door. Inside, Malik lay propped up on two pillows, his expression calm but worn. His chest rose and fell steadily now, no longer strained by the burns or the nightmares. Jordan sat by the window, unread messages blinking silently on his phone. He looked up as Raiden entered, nodding once without a word. Raiden stepped closer. "I won't stay long," he said quietly, placing the flowers beside Malik's bed. "I just wanted to say thank you." Malik's brow furrowed slightly. "For what?" he asked, his voice hoarse but curious. Raiden lowered himself into the chair at the edge of the bed, staring at the floor for a long moment before answering. "You gave me back my conscience," he said, his voice nearly a whisper. "I forgot what that was for a while." The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was full of understanding. Malik offered a faint smile. The same smile that had once sparked fear and suspicion now felt like it had taken back its meaning. Raiden met it with one of his own. The moment lingered, then passed like a quiet truce between storms. Outside the hospital, the world hadn't stopped. Protesters no longer filled the sidewalks, but supporters did. Banners of solidarity flapped in the breeze, and photos of Malik's recovery were pinned next to signs that read, "Smile with Purpose." People weren't just marching anymore. They were watching. They were remembering. The media had begun shifting, too. News anchors, once hesitant to speak firmly, now described Jordan Avery with new reverence. The quiet architect of accountability. His name was no longer just linked to federal training programs. It was tied to change. But Jordan didn't care about labels. He avoided every interview, declined every television appearance. His focus remained narrow. Malik's recovery. Malik's healing. That was the mission. Late one evening, Jordan sat across the room as Malik practiced deep breathing exercises. The boy's body was still sore in places, his posture stiffer than before. But he was getting stronger. With each breath in, each count held and exhaled, he reclaimed a bit more of what had been taken from him. The room glowed in soft orange from the hallway lights. Jordan's phone buzzed again. This time, he picked it up. "Elias," he answered, recognizing the voice immediately. Captain Elias Roden, his old trainee, now overseeing federal oversight for aviation enforcement. There was a smile in Elias's tone. "We've got an offer," he said. "We want you to head a new task force. Ethical enforcement across all major airports, training, policy design, the whole framework." "Your call." Jordan leaned back in his chair, watching Malik raise his arms slowly, steadying them in midair before letting them fall. "I appreciate it," Jordan said. "But no." Elias sounded surprised. "No." Jordan's gaze didn't leave Malik. "I don't want to train officers this time," he said, each word clear, deliberate. "I want to train their leaders." There was silence on the other end, followed by a quiet chuckle. "That's fair," Elias replied. "I'll hold the seat open, just in case." When the call ended, Jordan slipped the phone into his pocket and crossed the room. Malik lowered his arms with a soft grunt. "Too stiff?" Jordan asked. Malik shook his head. "No, just slow." Jordan crouched beside him. "Slow is fine. We're not racing anyone." Malik's fingers tapped lightly on the blanket. "Sometimes I wonder, why me?" Jordan paused. Then, placing a hand gently over Malik's, he said, "Because the world needs reminders of what strength looks like when it doesn't have to shout." Malik nodded, the corners of his lips lifting just slightly. The incident had left scars, faint and deep, visible and invisible. But it also left something else behind, something they couldn't measure in headlines or hospital charts. It left purpose. Jordan sat back as Malik returned to his breathing, the monitor beside him blinking in slow, healthy rhythm. Outside, the wind stirred leaves into soft spirals, the city humming with quiet motion. A life paused, not broken. Jordan closed his eyes, exhaled, and thought of the long road still ahead, the policies to change, the people to face, the silence to break. But for now, in this room, with this boy, he allowed himself a moment of stillness. Jordan knew the world would forget details over time, but not the symbol. One smile, he thought, can outlast an empire of fear. The ribbon had already been cut. Cameras flashed from every corner of the newly renovated terminal, but none of the reporters dared raise their voices too loudly. The air inside Brentford International felt different now, quieter, heavier with memory. Travelers moved respectfully through the reopened checkpoint where just 6 months ago, a single moment of bias had exploded into national reckoning. Malik Avery stood still, his frame leaner now, his posture more upright than before. He wore a tailored black jacket, simple but sharp, and his shoes echoed softly against the polished tile floor. Beside him stood his uncle, Jordan Avery, equally composed. The space around them opened like a clearing in the middle of a crowd, the kind of pause granted not by power, but by respect. The plaque was small, brass, clean lines, just beneath the security archway, fixed to a concrete pillar. It read, "Courage is sometimes a smile that refuses to fade." Malik's eyes lingered on those words longer than anyone else's. He said nothing, but his hands, once clenched by hospital sheets, now hung relaxed at his sides. Jordan watched him quietly, resisting the urge to speak. He knew this moment wasn't his to shape. It belonged to the boy who'd stood still when it mattered most. Reporters huddled behind velvet ropes, some live-streaming, others scribbling notes. A few officers stood in uniform by the gates, their hands behind their backs, expressions solemn. One nodded at Malik as he passed. Another whispered a soft, "Thank you," as Jordan glanced by. It was respect, not performative, but reluctant, earned, not gifted. As the ceremony ended, a gentle announcement sounded overhead, signaling the next flight. The terminal slowly returned to motion, but a ripple of awareness followed Malik and Jordan as they walked away from the checkpoint. Every footstep seemed to echo against the memory of screams and sparks. They passed the spot where Malik had fallen, though no marker remained. The tile looked newer, a subtle replacement the public wouldn't notice. But Malik did. His gaze dipped only for a second before rising again. Outside, the sky had grayed. The press dispersed. Malik and Jordan walked side by side in silence through the parking terrace, shoes crunching softly against damp concrete. It had started to rain, light at first, almost a mist, then heavier. Drops slid down the glass panels above them as they approached the lot. Halfway across the lot, Malik broke the silence. "Do you ever think about him?" he asked. Jordan stopped. He didn't need to ask who. The question carried its own weight. He turned slightly, meeting Malik's eyes. "Officer Dallard," Malik clarified. "Do you ever think about him?" Jordan's face didn't harden, but something behind his eyes shifted. He looked out across the wet tarmac, watching the lines of airplanes idle in the mist. His voice came low and steady. "Every day," he said, "because if I stop thinking about him, I stop understanding how we got here." There was no anger in his words, only clarity. Malik studied his uncle's face as if searching for the cost behind the calm. Rain tapped gently against their shoulders now, no longer avoidable. Neither moved to shield themselves. The storm was soft, but persistent, coating the airport's steel and glass bones with a shimmer that turned every reflection into silver ghosts. Malik tilted his head back. The raindrops kissed his cheeks like a benediction. He let them fall freely, unafraid. They did not sting. They reminded him he was alive. Jordan stepped forward, placing a firm hand on Malik's shoulder. The gesture was light but grounding, just enough to say what words couldn't. "Remember this, Malik," he said quietly. "You didn't change the world by fighting. You changed it by standing still when they expected you to fall. They didn't speak again. They didn't need to." Together, they stepped forward through the rain, leaving behind a terminal that had once symbolized fear, but now gleamed with quiet redemption. He tased a child for joy and learned terror from the family that trains the fearless. If you believe authority must answer for every abuse, subscribe now, because justice never forgets who's watching. Disclaimer: the story you just watched is fictional. It explores racism, prejudice, and the abuse of authority based on bias and misunderstanding. Its purpose is to raise awareness, inspire empathy, and encourage reflection on justice, accountability, and the importance of treating every person with fairness and respect.